Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. I am so excited to have my new friend, Johanna, here with me today. This girl is a firecracker. I met her last week. We had a little bit of a pre-call, and I was so inspired by just her overall sense of confidence, her overall mindset. She's a highly successful businesswoman. You guys are going to learn more about her here in a few minutes. But I know that I love high vibing with fellow women. Like, I love when I find other women who just are super passionate about what they do. They're purpose driven, they're motivated, and you could just tell. I mean, I know a lot of you can't see us. We have a little video on YouTube, but in case you're listening to this audibly, you can just see her confidence exude from her. And so I'm so excited to introduce her to you guys to hear what she has to say today. We're going to be diving into the topics of stress management and habits and just healthy lifestyle. I also want you guys to hear about what she's up to and what she's doing with her Limitless podcast, which is incredible. I've had the chance of listening to a couple episodes, and I get to be a guest on her show as well. So I'm excited to have you here, Johanna. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. And oh man, what an amazing introduction. I'm going to hire you to be my hype woman after this because that was awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I think we're going to have fun today. I think it's going to be a great episode. I love, introducing women to women listening. I mean, I know that the dominant person listening to this podcast is someone who is wanting to improve their health, not just their physical health, but their mental health. And I know we're going to touch on that today. But I think that when women can get exposed to other women who are just totally secure in who they are, and they're just, like I said, they're purpose driven, I think it's a beautiful thing. So I think you're going to bring a lot of value to the show today. So what I want to do to just get us started is just have you tell our listeners a little bit about you. Like, who are you day to day? What do you do? Tell us, where are you from? Like, anything you want to share, we want to hear it.
Sure. Yeah. So the easiest one is where I'm from. I'm from New York. I grew up here and I live here now. And I love it here. It's a big city, very busy, but it's awesome. I used to work specifically in finance at a big bank, working at like financial forecasting and planning, and focused really on strategy. And yeah, that was about as fun as it sounds. So I knew I wanted to do something different. I knew that I wanted to run my own company. I had no idea what that meant or what that looked like. I just knew that I wanted to do something. So I decided to find a problem and to see if I could solve it and build a company around it. And I would 100% not recommend that to anyone. Definitely the worst approach ever. And it was super stressful, but I did it. And I started an app, which was a two-sided marketplace for trainers and gyms. And essentially how Instagram, when it first was launched, made everybody a professional like videographer and photographer. My app basically did that for trainers to make it super, super simple for everyday trainers to create quality content and online fitness plans and online personal training, and manage everything from payments, global payments, and all the video aspect of it, and just make it super simple for them to earn money online. And while I was doing that, and it was great, it found its success, I didn't like it. It wasn't like my passion. It wasn't my purpose. And I was really determined to kind of figure out what my passion was. And I really had no idea what I was doing. I just kind of like gave up in terms of like, I just kind of put my hands in the air and said, I'm giving up control. Let me just kind of see where this takes me. And it took me in a bunch of different directions. I ended up doing consulting for a little bit of time on M&A, helping get friends of mine who also started their own companies, helping them get it acquired, because strategy and finance was super easy for me. And so I started doing that, and it was cool. I learned a lot, but again, not my passion. And it kind of like took me around the world here until I landed on something I do really care about, which is helping specifically driven female entrepreneurs. From working in corporate to working as an entrepreneur, I feel like it allowed me to see all different sides of things and understand both perspectives. And one of the things I found so incredibly frustrating running my own company was how difficult, like obnoxiously difficult it was to actually get the answers I was looking for. I felt like if I had specific questions, I love Google. It's a great resource. And so I would like type in all my very specific questions, but I would have to spend hours sorting through fluff content to get an answer that I wasn't even super confident was the right answer, but I didn't really have any other options.
Mhm.
So I started this new company called Frankly Co. And my goal with that company is to provide driven female entrepreneurs with everything that they need to know, to cut the fluff, to make it super simple, and for them to find the answers they're looking for and feel competent and confident in their decision making, so that they can actually like focus on the purpose of their company as opposed to stressing themselves out, spending all this time trying to find out like the minute details of like every day running your business.
Mhm.
So that's really what I've been focused on right now, and also hosting my new podcast, Limitless. And so, similar to Frankly, it's kind of all in line with the brand as we have open, honest, and direct conversations with incredible other female business owners. And the goal is to provide people, again, with like that actionable intel. So you listen to something, and from each episode, you know the next step that you need to take. You learn something, but you also learn like how to apply what it is you learned in a super simple and easy to understand way.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love what you're doing. I know when we talked last week, I remember telling my husband, like, as soon as we hung up, I'm like, this girl's the real deal. Like, you should hear what she's got going on. I mean, I just think everything that you just said is so needed in the world of, I know for me, like female entrepreneurship. And we talked about this a little bit, but I want to bring it to the show too. This idea that, a lot of times women, especially I think business women, fall victim to this sort of, I don't want to call it gossip, but we tend to revolve our conversations around our feelings, right? Like how we're feeling about something, or things that are stressing us out, or things that are making us happy, or emotionally driven conversation. And I know for me in building my business, whether it was with my network marketing business, in the last decade, or branching out of that and now doing the podcast and what I'm doing now, sometimes I just wanted business answers. Like sometimes I just wanted someone to be very candid with me and to just give me the bullet points or to tell me what I needed to do. And it was so hard to find. Although it's interesting because I have a mentor in my business who is a man. He's a very successful man, has an online business in the coffee business. And I went to him and asked him if he would be my mentor. And within one conversation, I felt like I learned so much, like within just an hour, because he gave me the direct answers that I needed. And so I think what you're doing is so powerful. I think there are, women everywhere who have this sort of like inner purpose and inner drive, and they want to put it to the test. They want to start a business, or they want to be, in that realm and considered, in that realm, and yet they can't get the answers that they need. And so I love that you're doing this. I love that you're creating a little tribe around this. I know in my history has shown that if you can find other women, especially, but if you can find other people that vibe high with you, who you can ask those questions to, and that you can feel comfortable being around, it also holds you accountable, right? So when you say you want to do something, you've got these people with you who are like, are you going to do the thing? Right. And so the tribe around it is hugely successful as well. So thanks for the background. That I want to talk more about, what you're doing as we move into the podcast. But first, I want to kind of touch on your personal story. You've mentioned that you've done a few things that sort of, fit the bill and paid the bills, so to speak, but they weren't necessarily your calling. Talk to us about stress. Like, how has stress sort of played a role in your life? Like, how has it followed you, and how does that contribute maybe to what you're hoping to do with your new business?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I do love talking about this because I struggled so much with stress, like majority of my life until 4 years ago, or 5 years ago at this point. I was just like, no, it's okay, I'm good. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like, the way I'm feeling. Like I really just I struggled. I didn't know how to manage my stress. I always found reasons to get frustrated. I'm nice type A personality where I love having control of situations, and obviously, like, it's life. You can't control everything, and I was really bad at accepting that and dealing with situations where I just couldn't be in control, and it affected me obviously like mental health wise because I wasn't happy, and it affected me physically too. I had such horrific gastrointestinal issues for almost my entire life, and then 5 years ago I kind of just got to a point where I had enough I knew I wanted to do things differently. I had absolutely no idea how to. I just knew that like I didn't want to continue on the path that I was continuing on.
Mhm.
And I was really just like over it. And so I said, like, someone had recently told me about this really cool like yoga retreat that they went on. And I was like, very new to any type of like spiritual work. Like I was the one who was like, I can't meditate. My brain never shuts off. I'm not even going to try.
Mhm.
And all that stuff was like a little bit out there for me. I wasn't really comfortable with it, which is funny because now I tell everybody to do it. But back then it was so new. And they had told me about this person who had terminal cancer. The doctor said, you're going to die in 4 weeks. And she just like kind of gave up. So she decided to try to use like mentality to help herself and to cure her cancer. And she did. And I was like, well, this sounds kind of crazy, but you know what? I'm like so desperate for some like little piece of hope to hold on to. So if this woman who's dying from cancer can find a way to cure her cancer, I can fix whatever it is I'm dealing with. So I just went on to Google and I was like, how to change your brain? Literally, I just Googled. I was like, how do you change your brain? How do you change the way you think? How do you like, cure like stomach issues? And I got like all these different books. The first book that I ever read was something from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it was called You Are the Placebo. And since then, I've read all his books, and it really talks about like how you are in control and like you can really change your life and the way you think. And I started implementing slowly but surely all the practices that I started reading about. I read a ton of books, and within 6 months, I had zero gastrointestinal issues. None. Like my whole life, I had all these problems, gone. 6 months. And it was like amazing. Like my stress, my anxiety, it like went down by like 70%. And then over the years, it continued to like evolve where today I don't really get upset about something for more than 5 minutes. Like, and that's something really has to be like that crazy to like get me upset for 5 minutes. And I recently was telling someone about this who I hadn't seen in a while, and they burst out laughing because they knew me like years ago, and they were like, "Wait, you only dwell on something for 5 minutes now?" And they were like, "That's like the greatest thing I've ever heard." So for me, it was like a huge transformation. And if you want, we can like get into all the different tools that I use, but
Yeah, I would
I
love
think,
that. And that was going to be my next question is,
yeah,
okay, so tell us how, because I know for me, like I'm a perfectionist, I'm a type A
yeah,
personality. And so I've worked on this as well. It's funny that you mentioned
yeah,
yoga. My yoga instructor, who also happens to be one of my closest friends, and I consider her to be a mentor in my life as well. I've had her on the show. She is sort of this resounding mirror for me. Like every time every time I'm around her, I just feel this sense of, okay, like calm it down, Jenny, like dial it back in. And she has really helped me learn how to control my breathing and to really get into this sort of like, I don't know what you'd call it, like really tapping into that sort of autonomic nervous system where you can really start to feel like what your body is feeling, and not just physically, but emotionally. And you can really kind of scale it back. But I'd love to hear your perspective, because obviously it sounds like this is something you're mastering. What kind of tangibles do you do to really to not dwell on things for 5 minutes or for more than 5 minutes?
yeah. So what I do now is a little bit different than what I did in the beginning. And I would love to walk your listeners through like a couple of different tools, because for anyone who's listening right now, who is super new to this, I think there are certain tools that will be best for them because it's super easy to apply, especially when it's like such a strange new concept versus like if you've been practicing this for a while. So like the first things I did when I was like so anti everything was reading. Reading was like the best possible thing to do. I would say, with a caveat, a lot of these books frustrated me because while I learned so much, they almost made it seem like you would see an instant result. And then I automatically was like, oh, okay, I'm a failure. I'm fully failing at this because I don't see it that instantly. So I would say, like, definitely read a ton of books, like find the ones that resonate with you. Like for me, I love anything Dr. Joe Dispenza. I love Wayne Dyer. I love Gabby Bernstein. Like I'm happy to also, after we record this, send you like a whole list of my own like recommended
Yeah, that'd be
books
great.
for your listeners. But so I would say just read, but understand that like things aren't necessarily instant. It takes time, and just to keep practicing it and practicing it. And even if you hear stories of people who have instant success, because that is there and that does exist, if you don't, that doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means that you have more to unlearn, more habits to unlearn. The second thing that I found really helpful was hypnosis and meditation, but because I was super new to it, I just did it at its most basic form. I had really bad insomnia at the time, so I just started listening to Deepak Chopra's sleep meditation. I would just put headphones on and fall asleep with headphones, and same thing. Within like 2 weeks, I was taking melatonin for like 5 years. 2 weeks, nothing, never taken anything since. Have no problem sleeping. So I did those things quite consistently. And then I started implementing meditation. Meditation was like such a big thing that I really struggled with because my brain went everywhere except for here. And trying to like
I'm with you.
shut that down was really complicated. And still sometimes it's complicated, but like I feel like if I don't meditate, like I can't properly function at this point because I need that quiet time. And then the thing that really like transformed my life would be just like changing the way that I think about things. And this is going to sound super, super cliche, but I became fairly religious in 2020. And honestly, like getting that like spiritual practice and like connection with God for me was like the thing that changed everything. And the little tiny trick that I use now whenever I get upset about something is I usually just say, like, I pause, I take time out and I say, God, please help me think through this differently. I don't like the way I'm thinking about it. I understand that I'm seeing this particular issue through a lens of, let's say, my past, or a lens of like trauma, or a lens of like, previous experiences that I don't want to see what I'm seeing right now. Please help me see it as it actually is. Within usually like few minutes, I have a totally different perspective. And it's just like taking that time out to ask that question and just know that like to recognize that I'm acting and thinking through the lens of old habits, old behaviors, and I'm really trying to think through things differently now because I want to unlearn everything that it is I had taught myself based on my life experiences and the people I surrounded myself with when I was younger.
Yeah. It makes me think, I mean, you said this earlier too, that, it really starts with how we do or don't control our thoughts and what those thoughts lead to, right? Like there's the old saying, right? Like your thoughts contribute to your words, which contribute to your actions, which are essentially your life, right? And so if we can change the way we think, then perhaps we can change the way we overall feel and our impact in the world. And I know for me, having my 5-year-old, especially, so we're starting to see this sort of domino effect happen where she emulates me and then the 1-year-old emulates her. So it's, sometimes I can really see myself in different ways because I'm seeing them sort of embody like different things that I do. And it brings about this extra sense of awareness that I didn't have before. Like, oh, do I do that? Whether it's a mannerism or something that they're emulating. And so what I got from what you just said was 2 different things. One, it's controlling the thoughts, but it's also establishing this sense of awareness within yourself to know, okay, this is a thought pattern that's unfriendly to me. Like this is not serving me. How can I pause, whether it's a moment with God or a moment to yourself or whatever the case is for the listener, to really say, this isn't something that I want to feel. And so how can I change the way that I'm thinking about it? I think that's so powerful. I think that so much of life is not what happens to us, but how we react to it. And so, of course, that reaction comes from the way we're thinking. And so I love this. So you've mentioned some books that you like. I'm not a Joe Dispenza. I've listened to some things that he's done, but I've not really dove into his books. So I'll have to do that. For me, my journey started with a book that someone handed to me probably 13 years ago called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And it was just about this approach to life that was, an airplane can be 1 degree off base, but it will miss its landing in New York City by several states. Like it's a huge difference. That 1 degree difference is a huge difference overall. And it just got me thinking about how if I wanted to grow personally, professionally, spiritually in my relationships, it was going to take an intentional effort. It wasn't going to be something that I could just take the airplane off into the sky and hope that I landed in the right place. Like it needed intentionality, it needed planning, it needed different types of thoughts. So I'd love to hear from you, what types of things, and it sounds like you do meditation every day. Like what other types of things do you do every day as part of your routine, maybe that keeps you in that headspace?
Yeah, so I definitely go into that, but I did want to just say one thing based on what you said before. And it's So when it comes to controlling your thoughts, I think the really cool thing is that we have this guidance system, and it's super easy to tell in a sense, like when something kind of goes wrong and doesn't fit right. If you don't feel good, then it's probably something that like you're thinking, right? So it's like that's an automatic sign. Like you don't are you feeling happy? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling angry? If like the feeling sucks, like that's great guidance because you're like, okay, now I have somewhere to turn to. So if you feel something you don't like, what is it that you're thinking right now? Like it's super, like if you think about something like something that pisses you off, if you just start thinking about it right now and spend the next 3 minutes thinking about it, you're going to be so angry and like you're just going to go crazy, right? And that's great. Like you shouldn't think like that, but that's great because it's a sign and it shows you exactly what's causing the emotion. And you can identify patterns within yourself, like to see what continuously triggers a certain emotion. And that helps you identify the thought. And then when you question the thought, why am I thinking this way? You kind of are able to kind of take all those steps backwards to find its original source. And then it's no longer as powerful because it doesn't really matter. Like once you know where it comes from, you can kind of question the belief and see if it's even really yours or if it's something your mom said when you were 5 years old that like stuck with you for so long. So I think that's super helpful in terms of like what I do every day. I have like a very specific routine. I come from a German background. I love routine. I love structure. I love organization. So every morning when I wake up, I just don't look at my phone after I shut my alarm off. I put my phone on do not disturb and I go sit. I do about 10 minutes of like prayer. And then I drink my coffee, which is I need every single day. And while I drink my coffee, I usually like to read a little bit of like scripture for myself, like using Bible app, because for me, that's just super helpful to start my day. And then I always do deep meditation. I usually like to read at least for 10-15 minutes. I journal and then after I do all that, I kind of kickstart my day. And then before I go to bed at nighttime, I also do about 15 to 20 minutes of meditation just to kind of like come back to like focus and center. And then if I ever do find like I have a crazy, super stressful day, I just like take a 10-minute time out and just like do some like deep breathing, which I find super helpful. I also recently started doing EFT, which is tapping. Someone introduced it to me, and I wouldn't say I know if it's working, but I keep doing it anyways. It takes about 15 minutes. I do it 3 times a day, specifically for manifesting. And I mean, we'll see, but I feel good while I do it, which is why I keep doing it. But in terms of like, have I seen results yet? Not yet, but I know a lot of people swear by it and they love it. So I'm like super open to always like trying new things. But over the years, I've done a little bit of everything. I've done like deep hypnosis, I've done, which like accesses your subconscious mind. I've done something called SRT, which is spiritual response therapy, which a friend of mine introduced me to, and I thought it was super wacky, but I felt great, so I kept doing it. So I'm super open to like try all these different tools. And then for me, what I find is super helpful is like don't rely on just one tool because these things are not supposed to be a crutch. They're not supposed to be like, oh, this is the thing that saves me. This is the thing that changes my life. It's like, no, you're the thing that changes your life. You get accountability for everything. That means anything that's horrible that happens and anything that's good that happens. And it's like not that pleasant when you take accountability at first because you have to be super honest with yourself about the things that are great that you've done and also the things that are not so great. But the cool thing is once you take accountability, you can kind of control everything that happens to you for more or less, or how you respond to everything that happens to you is a better way to think of it. And all these like different tools just become assets to help you in that growth journey. They shouldn't like, I'm not a fan of just relying on one thing and like being like, I need it every single week. It's like my crutch because then you're turning to something outside of yourself as opposed to inside yourself and just using these tools as additional assets to kind of just help you within your growth.
Yeah. How powerful is, I think, a couple of things came to mind when you were talking. The first thing is, it sounds like your morning routine is very similar to mine. I have small children, so sometimes it's a little interrupted, but I do like to have some time dedicated, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes in the morning to doing some sort of devotional or personal growth reading, or just kind of just set my mind right. before I do enter the day and enter the different hats that I wear. I know Brendan Burchard has been talking about tapping, so that's something that I want to look into too. But he's one of my favorite personal development authors and speakers, and I just think he has a really clear way of reaching people. But he talks about this idea of transitions. So this is the first thing that I was thinking. He talks about transitions throughout your day and how if you go through those transitions with intentionality, how much better your day can be. And so that's been a huge thing for me that I just wanted to mention in case someone listening needs to hear it. For a lot of us as women, we do go from, career woman during the day to maybe a mom in the evening to wife, when the kids go to bed. Like there's so many different roles that we play throughout the day. And I think what can happen is we let stress happen to us by not taking control of those transitions from one to the next. And so for me, like hearing his book, he has a couple of different books that I love, but High Performance Habits is one of my favorite, where he talks about this idea of transitions. Like when you pull into your driveway from work, you need 60 seconds to just take 5 deep breaths and to set an intention for how you're going to enter the next space.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'm leaving my work hat here in the car and now I'm entering my home where I'm going to be the most present father, husband, etc. And he goes through that mantra that he tells himself. Same thing for doorways. He uses doorways as triggers. And that's something that I've taken from him as well, where it's like, when I get up in the morning, I might do my devotional in my moment, and then it's time for me to go get my girls. And so I enter their bedroom. And for me, it's like, let's set the intention of who am I going to be today? Like, who am I going to show up for today? And how am I going to do that? And so that I thought of that, but I also thought of just your morning ritual in general is very much like the Miracle Morning. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Miracle Morning by Hal.
Yeah. I actually read. It was like probably the first 10 books that I read.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of Hal Elrod and the Miracle Morning, and I'll link that up in the show notes if you haven't read it. It's one of those books where you read it and you're like, is this really, of course it's a bestseller, but it's the most simple concept in the entire world. Like it makes me mad that I didn't think of it and write a book about it. But he has a really great sort of process that you can follow for establishing your mornings and kind of setting your headspace in the right place. But the final thing that I want to kind of lead us into is this idea of how we can control our thoughts, how we can control our breathing. By the way, that's been huge for me too. Like the same friend of mine that I was talking about before, my yoga instructor, has really taught me that in those moments of stress, I hold on to my breath. We as humans hold on to our breath. And so for an example of that is I really hate to fly on an airplane. I do it. I love to travel, but I just really don't enjoy the airplane. And so I remember telling her like, oh, we have this big flight. This was years ago. And we were flying across the world, halfway across the world. And I said, I don't want to be on the plane for like an entire day. Like, what are we going to do? It's going to be so stressful. And she was like, you control your breath. And I caught myself so many times on that airplane where my shoulders would tense up and I just felt like my whole body was in such a state of stress and fight or flight. And then sure enough, when I really tapped into it, I thought, I am like holding my breath. I'm not breathing. Like I'm literally just breathing in these little tiny increments instead of these deeper breaths. Yeah. So just calling attention to that for the listener and letting them know that a lot of times it starts there. Like if you can have the awareness of what you're holding on to, whether it's physically and the tension in your body or just whether or not you're holding on to that breath, that can be huge. Something that I started doing recently is this box breathing, which is really simple, where you breathe 4 counts in, you hold for 4 counts, 4 counts out, and then hold for 4 counts. It's called box breathing. And I've been doing it. I sometimes forget to do it throughout the day, but I do try to do it like when I'm transitioning from one thing to the next, but I also try to do it in the evening before bed. So when I lie down in bed at night, I've started doing it. And the interesting thing is I've been using the Aura ring now for almost 5 months, which is like a sleep tracking ring. And I was really struggling with my REM and my deep sleep when I first started using it. I was blown away by how poorly I was sleeping. I was sleeping 7 hours a night, but I didn't realize it wasn't really that great of sleep. And so I started doing this box breathing before bed, and my REM and my deep sleep have over doubled since I've been doing that. And it's so powerful. Like, I don't think people understand. I think there are so many women that are just living in this constant state of stress, this constant state of busy and chaos and holding on to the breath, that they don't realize that if they could just control that and start to be aware of their thoughts, like how much different their world could be. So I want to hear, I didn't even realize this until I was looking over your bio and such. Like you've had a 20-pound weight loss. Like you've obviously done a lot in just your overall health, whether it's physical or internal. So we've heard about your sort of meditation and mindset practices, but how do you kind of go about like your eating and your nutrition and your sleep and those sort of lifestyle habits to help you be as successful as you are?
Yeah, so that one's a really, really interesting thing. And I was just talking about this with, I had my annual checkup the other day. My doctor was just like laughing. He was like, I can't even believe it. He's like, like if I tell my patients this, they'll probably fire me as a doctor, because most people just don't want to really think about the importance of mindset, especially like in this country. Like it's really, it's very easy to kind of focus on all these other things and other treatments, which are super important. But I think it's really important for us to also take into the mindset. And I'll talk about the weight loss thing too. But I think the breath work that you were talking about is so important because it's really tough for us to make objective decisions when we're super stressed out, because then we end up acting out of fear. Instead of whatever else it is we should be taking action through. And so when you do take that like time out just to do those deep breathing exercises, I think that's really good, even if it's for 5 minutes. So I highly recommend that. In terms of weight loss and like nutrition, so I've always been like a huge fan of nutrition. I was a competitive gymnast when I was younger for 12 years, and so I was very physically active, but I didn't like fuel my body the way I should, not because of like, I didn't do it intentionally. It's just that I didn't have the knowledge. My family didn't have the knowledge. So as I got older, I became super interested in just learning about nutrition, because I knew nothing about it. And I had a friend who was a holistic nutritionist who had MS and kind of again reversed her MS based on just changing her diet. And so she actually started focusing on nutrition for people who had immune disorders. And she's helped so many like people with their symptoms and like really like fix their health through that. So I started learning more about that. I also saw this incredible woman in Connecticut who uses technology to basically tell you what your body needs to be fueled by. So it's really cool because like we have this idea of like, oh, I'm eating enough or I'm eating too little, but half the time you don't actually really know. And she has all this really super cool technology that kind of tells you what you're doing. And based off of that, she gives you an idea of what you should be eating on a daily basis. So for me, I like a few years ago, for the most part, cut out all types of processed food. Obviously, like if I eat out at a restaurant, it's like whatever, but like at least for like myself, I try to not buy things that have like a ton of ingredients in it, especially if I can't pronounce them. I don't buy it. I try not to eat it. I try to eat like always like, fruits, vegetables, protein, and I exercise a lot. And so I was doing all that, yet I was not losing any weight. And I couldn't understand it because any of my friends who exercised the way I did, who ate the way I did, they lost all this weight. And so I got into this super unhealthy mindset and limiting belief of like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Like only this happens to me. Things are so much harder for me. It's so hard for me to lose weight. No matter what I do, I can't do it. And of course, self-fulfilling prophecy, that's exactly what happened. So I think it was last March, I said, you know what? I've done all these really cool things when I shifted my mindset. What if I could do that again now with my diet and exercise? So I looked in the mirror and I was like, what if I looked exactly how I wanted to look? And then I closed my eyes. I said, let's take away all like ideas of what this physical image would look like. How would I feel if I was super strong? If my body was strong, if I ate food and I felt the fuel from eating foods that were good for my body, what would that feel like? And I just started to imagine, and I just felt so good. I was like so hyped up. I was like, yeah, I can do anything. I have so much energy. And I got really excited. And then I was like, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. So I started doing this weird thing where I was kind of eating the same way, but I would just ask a question before I would eat, be like, what does my body want to eat today? What does my body need right now? What would be the best thing to fuel my body? And the funny thing is that when I stopped beating myself up for thinking that it was hard for me to lose weight, and I started being in touch with what type of nutrition my body needed, one, I started to actually cut out a lot of foods because realized I was eating them not actually because I liked them, but like for other reasons. Like maybe my friends were eating it and I wanted to like hang out, so we would eat it together. But I was like, I don't even really like it, so why am I even eating it? And then I just started adding like more vegetables to my plate because I actually really liked them. But I was still eating like pizza once a week. I live in New York. The pizza's so good here, and I love pizza. And it was so funny because like by not really doing like tangibly that much different like things than what I was doing, pretty much eating the same way more or less, like I said, I just added maybe a little bit more vegetables to my plate and I changed my mindset around it. I literally lost 20 pounds. And like, it was so funny because even in the summer, I was playing a lot of tennis and then I actually lost more weight than I wanted to. And I was like pissed off. I was like, no, I feel like I lost too much muscle. And my mom was laughing. She's like, I don't think I ever heard you complain about losing weight. And so it was really cool because like things that were so hard for me before, it just became super simple by just changing the way I think about it and just constantly like being in tune with what my body wants and needs. And by doing that, I automatically was like eating things that were good for me and like stopping if I was full. And when I would get hungry, I would like recognize the signs that my body was giving me to like take a time out and eat something. And it's amazing what kind of happens when you do that and you do end up seeing the results. So I'm a huge fan of anything mindset. Like it really does like transform your life. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I love everything that you just said, really emulates. I don't know if you've read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, but she talks about two different mindsets, essentially. One being a growth mindset where you're open and you're sort of manifesting growth and what you're wanting to become versus this sort of victim mindset, which is losing weight is hard for me, right? Everything you were just saying is this sort of victim mentality. I see it all the time. I mean, I've been a health and wellness coach now for 13 years. I work dominantly with women. And if I had $1 for every woman that came to me and said like, well, this is just really hard for me, or I have a different body type or whatever. And granted, of course, here I am, the purpose of this podcast is obviously to educate women on their hormone health. So first and foremost, let me just say, if it's a struggle for you, and if you feel like you're doing things and it's not working, we need to look underneath the hood. We need to look at your hormones. But that being said, a lot of it really does come back to your mindset. It really, the fact that you were willing and able to just kind of almost like manifest, right? Like you were almost like, no, like this is who I want to become. This is how I want to feel when I'm fueled by my food. This is the energy I want to have in the world. This is the strength I want to feel. Like that's a different mindset than losing weight is hard for me. Why is this so hard for me? And kind of falling victim to that. So I think that's super powerful. And it is something that is so, so common. And I see it all the time. I saw this quote recently that said something about, when it comes to healthy eating and exercising and this healthy lifestyle, a lot of people are afraid of it because they're so afraid by what they have to lose. When in reality, they don't realize everything they have to gain. And it's so true because right now, my team of health coaches and I are endorsing this. It's a gut regimen. So it's like a gut health cleanse sort of thing. And it really helps people understand if they have food sensitivities and, if they are allergic to anything, or if something's just inflammatory to their system, and it's helping them sort of cleanse the gut. And it's amazing to me. And I think a lot of it is contributed to just our societal norms right now, but it's amazing to me how many women are so hesitant to push through. It's a 4-week program. And you would think that we're asking them to do like, this is forever, and it's like the mentality, the mindset behind it is the struggle piece. It is the struggle piece because they're so worried about what they have to give up. Well, I can't eat out with my family for this 4 weeks, or I can't have cheese, or I can't have this or that. And like, but listen, like it's 4 weeks of your whole life. It's 4 weeks where you are really just diving in to see what is going on inside your body and how you feel and how you're meant to feel. If you can't give yourself that to see what you have to gain, like we got to work on your mindset, And so it's interesting because I think that's the power of self-awareness. Like this all to me just keeps coming back to this idea of self-awareness. So I know that I want you to send us sort of like your resources. If you're willing to send us your resources for this, I think there are a lot of women listening who are like, ooh, man, like I think she's kind of talking to me, because maybe that's where they are. They're realizing that they have a little bit of a victim mindset, or that they are kind of stuck in a headspace that's not serving them and not helping them get to the next level. So as we kind of wrap this up, I want to ask you, you work with a lot of women who are highly successful, like women who are either entrepreneurs or business women who are really kind of looking to that next level. What are some common themes that you see, whether it's things that they are mastering, but also what are the main struggles that you see? And I want you kind of call that out for us before we wrap up today.
Yeah, so the number one thing they all have had in common is the mindset piece. And I found that super fascinating because I think when I first started, I was like really excited to hear people's different strategic approaches, like in specific things like marketing and like their finance and advertising and social media. And the number one thing every single woman has had in common was the way they approach things and the way they think about it. And they understand that the mindset piece is the foundation of everything that they do because their business is still at the end of the day a reflection of themselves. So that is the number one thing that they had in common. And along with that, it would be making sure that they are actually really passionate about what they are doing, and they truly believe in it at their core. And those are like complete fundamentals, like non-negotiables, I think at this point. And I've learned that too. And every single like successful woman and I've met like has done those things and uses that as the core foundation of everything that they do. So I would say that's like the number one thing. And I think the number one struggle, it depends on the industry, but actually a very common thing was going from 6 figures to 7 figures for women. And it's like someone was talking about it recently. That's like a phenomenon, and it goes back to their mindset. So I had someone on my podcast recently who talked about money mindset, and she's a money mindset coach, and she was saying the same thing. And she, like so many of her clients, like have all these beliefs around money since they were, children. And even if they thought they didn't, when they actually do the work, they realize that it's there. And it's like, if you're not seeing the results that you want to see, take a step back and seeing if a belief first is the cause of it, or if it's strategy. And this mindset coach, Brooke Ritchie, had said like everything, is 80% psychology, 20% action. And it was probably one of my favorite quotes I think I've ever heard, because as a very type A person and a logical person and a numbers and data loving person, I always thought it was like 95% strategy, 5% mindset. And I've learned that that's so wrong. Like it really isn't. So I would say like that was like a very, very common problem that all these women faced. And then like they have their general day-to-day things of like, just experimenting, you learn. And I think as long as you're comfortable constantly learning and unlearning, and you can find a method in business that works for you to learn as efficiently as possible, meaning if you try something, find out quickly whether or not it's effective, and then adjust your strategy based on what you've learned, I think you're always gonna be successful and find a way forward.
Yeah. Oh my. Yes. So for the last dozen years working as a leader in network marketing with a team of health coaches, I can speak for everything that you just said. So many times when I ask whether it's my team or I'm speaking for another team and someone asks me to cover, they're like, oh, will you do a Q&A? I'm like, sure, I'll do the Q&A. And 99% of the questions come back to belief. I mean, it'll be, well, how do you overcome objections? Well, I don't want to talk about how I overcome objections because I want to find out why you're getting them. Yeah. Why are you getting the objections? Well, you're getting the objections because you don't have the belief in the product. So I don't get those objections because I have full belief in my product. You know what I mean? Like, so what you just said, like totally puts words to what I've experienced, that if you have the belief, whether it's in yourself or in the product that you're representing or whatever, if you have the belief and you have the passion, you have that mindset. I remember someone telling me years ago, I said, what makes top health coaches in my industry? And she said, that's so easy to answer. She says they're willing to do whatever it takes and they're all in. Why are they all in? Because they have full belief, right? They have full belief in what they're doing. And so it's interesting because everything comes back to that. Everything comes back to just where your mind sits with any given subject, right? Same thing goes for like your family, your relationships. Like if you are constantly telling yourself, that's not for me. I wrote this down while you were talking. I'm thinking to myself, what's the voice in my head that is preventing me from thinking when you were talking money mindset? Okay. That's a good example. Like what's the phrase that keeps coming in my head? And the phrase that comes into my head often is, well, that's not for me. that's not for me because, right? And you tell yourself that,
Yeah.
that little voice in your head, whether it's money or it's weight loss or it's whatever, relationships, like it can be anything. If your little voice in your head is saying, well, that's not for me because, let me just call that out and say that is a huge excuse. And it's a huge sign that you need to be doing some work on your mindset. So I'm going to have all of Johanna's books and resources linked up in the show notes, as well as some of my own. So make sure you check out the show notes, you guys that are listening. But before we sign off, Johanna, please tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your podcast, anything else you want to direct them to. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks. So anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about Frankly for driven female entrepreneurs, you can go to franklyco.com. We are going to have an app launching soon and this really cool search engine, but we're always looking for beta testers. So you can sign up to get early access and become a beta tester. And if you're interested in learning more of all things business mindset and just hearing from incredible female entrepreneurs, you can check out the Limitless podcast with me, Johanna Buchweitz, on the App Store and on YouTube. And I would say just the final thing that I would highly recommend for anyone, especially if they are not fully familiar with their own limiting beliefs and want to get more awareness into anything that's blocking them, a great thing to do is to do the breathing that you had suggested. Just take like 5 minutes just to breathe. So you just calm down your nervous system and then get out a computer or a notebook, whatever feels better for you, and just ask yourself a question. And it could be, let's say, if we want to just use the money mindset example, like, what comes to mind or what's kind of blocking me from receiving money? And just type or write whatever kind of comes to mind, and don't think about it too much, because you'll find that all of a sudden you'll be putting things on paper that you were like, wait, I wasn't even aware of that. The subconscious mind captures so much. And when you ask yourself a question, it wants to give you an answer. And when you kind of just like make sure that you're in a calm state, you always find answers that are kind of hidden there. And it really comes to surprise you. And I think it's the best way to start to gain awareness of what mental blocks you are currently having that are caused by limiting beliefs that you've developed over time.
That's great advice. I love that. I started journaling a few years ago and it was a game changer for me, because it's amazing what comes out when you put pen to paper or get out the keyboard, because sometimes you're just internalizing a lot. Yeah. So it helps you kind of bring that forward. I love that advice. Well, I have had so much fun with you today. I don't know if one episode is going to be enough. We might have to have you back on in the future sometime so we can dive more into just women and professionalism and everything that you're doing. I can't wait for your beta to launch. I have signed up for it myself. I'm so excited for everything you're doing. Thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful. And I know we look forward to hearing more on the Limitless podcast. You guys check that out. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Cool.